It is Thursday, January 24th, 2019, and this is the MMA Beat. Welcome, everyone. My name is Luke Thomas. I'm the host of this program from MMA Fighting and SiriusXM. Appreciate you guys tuning in. I am joined by this panel of three donks. I'm not sure what else to call them.
Couldn't resist. Right.
To my left is Danny Segura from MMA Fighting, and back from his rhinovirus cruise is the one and only Brian Campbell from CBS Sports, and at the very end from The Ringer as well as MMA Fighting is the Iceman, man in the hat, Chuck Mindenhall. How was the cruise?
Fantastic.
Yeah?
But it feels good to be back.
Do you have HIV?
Wow. We're gonna start. We're just gonna. Yeah. All right. I'm back. Trust me.
So you were cracking these jokes before we went on camera, and now you put me in the silly mood, and now you've ruined the show. I blame you. As always, you look at the bottom of the screen there. We'll be taking your questions. The MMA Beat for after the program. We'll do after the beat.
I did want to say, shout out to MMA. I was wearing my Team Baron Henan Barao T-shirt on the cruise, and this janitor who barely spoke English came up to me and tapped me. And I didn't pay for the Wi-Fi plan, so I was in the dark. This was Sunday morning. He said, "Did Cejudo win?" in broken English. And I'm
Did you really?
I don't know, bro. You have Wi-Fi access. I don't.
Interesting.
It's a great moment.
So you did catch up, though.
I did catch up.
All right, we'll get to the UFC on ESPN event in just a second. Let's start with the news that broke yesterday. Our own Mark Ramundi. Shouts to Mark Ramundi from the A-Side live chat, and of course at MMA Fighting more generally. I think he's doing the Bellator workouts and all that stuff too.
Correct.
He broke the news that Jon Jones on fight day, if I'm not mistaken, correct? Tested positive again for the picograms of the M3 metabolite from oral turinabol. Now, this came from VADA. It did not come from the California State Athletic Commission. It did not come from USADA. USADA and I think the commission, certainly USADA had tested him the day before and it was clean. Then it pops up the next day at 33 picograms. Now, for folks who understand the context, 33 picograms is not a lot. A lot of times you can have hundreds of picograms, and even that wouldn't necessarily cross a threshold, depending on what the substance is. The problem is with oral turinabol, they don't really know what is what, although he is not going to receive a sanction from California, and he is not going to receive a sanction from USADA because they believe this is just the same old thing popping back up again. But I have seen a lot of questions from folks saying, well, how come one test one day can be negative and one test the next day can be positive? We'll get to some of these questions here in a second. But Brian, since you were absent, I'll go to you. I mean, I go to you reluctantly, but I go to you.
You shouldn't go to me first. Come
all right, let's go to Danny first. How about that?
All right, let's do it.
My man here next to me, Danny, we shall start with you so Brian can get his juices flowing here. When you saw this, I saw people being like, oh, it's no big deal. Couldn't disagree more, but maybe not for the same kinds of reasons. Is it a big deal to you?
I mean, this is what they were originally saying when this is literally the same situation that happened, prior to UFC 232, just copy and paste. They said, look, these things can happen, these things can pop up, and we don't know when they're going to pop up or not. But if they pop up, we know that as long as it's within these picogram range, it's just going to be from this old suspension, this old test, right? And that's exactly what's happening. And, at first, I remember when leading up to UFC 232, all this happened, there was outrage on social media. All the fighters are coming out and saying, the more this happens, the more normal it's going to get. Now it happened again, and you see nobody tweeting about it. Anthony Smith kind of wrote something, but even then he's like, yeah, I don't care. I know what I signed up for.
I like how that's Jon Jones' opponent's approach now. Just, I don't really care. We know.
Translation, I like money. That's really where we're at.
Yeah, I mean, how can you care if you actually want to fight him?
Yeah, exactly.
So at this point, it's just like we cannot. No one can disprove what the UFC is saying because there's not much evidence, to do that. So at this point, they're just going to go with the same thing. As long as Jon Jones doesn't test for anything other than that banned substance, and as long as it's within those picogram range, this is just going to keep popping up.
See, I don't think it's that easy where it's just like, oh, it's Groundhog Day, it's 232 all over again. This is a clown show. Like, how far are we away from Jon Jones going the Vanilla Ice route, going, no, I didn't have picograms, it's pictograms. My song was ding, 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 ding. It's like...
That's an old school reference that our listeners don't get, but I know which one you're talking about.
To me, it's a joke at this point. It's a joke. So if you're going to come back to me and be like, well, we don't really know what the science. Well, yeah, that's the point. We don't really know. UFC doesn't know. Exactly. USADA doesn't know. Now VADA doesn't know. It makes everyone look bad at this point. So after third...
Are you suggesting that they should be punishing him? Because remember, VADA only does testing. They don't hand out punishments. USADA could punish, even if it's from a commission or a VADA test. They still retain that right, apparently.
USADA facilitated
But they have all the parties involved to decide to pass. Would you say that the punishment...
It puts us in a really tough spot. Because, I mean, what, is the answer just suspend Jones again, even though he might be innocent? Well, no. But the fact that it's Jones that we're talking about makes it a very cloudy situation, because obviously it's not his first offense, and you're like, well, we got to give him the benefit of the doubt. We don't understand the science. This is his what number offense, not just on the performance-enhancing drug side, but on the I screwed up again side. So it's a continued slap in the face. It's like, hey, Dad slept with Mom, but Dad's a really good cook, and he has a lot of money, so let's just forgive him. And I felt like after 232, even with the unprecedented nature of moving a card for one man during holiday week, we were all like, you know what? Deep in our heart, we have one thing. For me, it might be, well, I just like MMA with Jon Jones in it. Swallow that. For you, it might be, well, the drug testing system's always been broken, and this proves it. For another man, it might be, man, I grew up on nitrates and MSG. Oh, that was me. But my point on this is, yeah, but you know, Dad slept with Mom. It doesn't mean he can bring his secretary back in the house once a month. So if this thing keeps popping up again, we're all just going to continue to feel stupid. I don't feel comfortable that I can say right now, oh, that's just from the old test. That's just lingering in the system. It doesn't affect him. How can anyone say that right now if the testers don't even understand the science? Yeah. It's a joke to me. I don't know if you have to press pause on Jon Jones' career till you can figure out the science, but to just act and see all these quotes from these state officials like, well, nothing's going to happen here. We can't. It's not double jeopardy.
It's like that caffeine's kicking in, big guy.
Come on, bro.
Yeah. here's the point, Chuck, and I think it's a good one. We keep thinking, oh, this will eventually peter out. Yeah. But remember, the tests about the M3 metabolite, this is what's hilarious to me. They know all about it. Exactly. They know nothing about it. And the test say it goes for 40 or 50 days. Well, how are we 17, 18 months to this point where it's like this? Here's my question. What if this lingers on for 2 more years, where every other month this is coming up?
That's a great question,
right?
And honestly, I think that's
stop?
really the thing that this brings up, because in the language it says something along the lines of 40 to 50 days. That's the language that they have.
They know nothing.
They don't know. Obviously, they don't. If they're sticking by the party line of like, okay, wait a minute, this is from the first administration or whatever. This is when it first was in his system. This is lingering. They're already busted that language. That language no longer applies because this goes back a year and a half.
July 2017.
So it goes back a long way. Of course, California is not going to make a big deal of this. They're the ones who justified putting him on the card and saying that to turncoat on him at this point and say like, well, you know something, this is a different amount. Maybe we need to look at this. I mean, they can't. It'd be hypocritical of them to do that. They have to stick to this. I agree with you. The big question now is, are we going to be running into this situation every time? Because at that point, I'm not sure how you handle it. You can't just be like, this guy, he can have residual. Nobody else can. But this guy, this is just old stuff that won't get out of his system. You know, I don't.
It's a weird hall pass.
Here's what's going to happen. Somebody might be in a similar circumstance who could admit, because remember, there was a theory floating out there, and that's all they have is a theory, which I'll get to in just a second. But the theory was that, well, it's from the clomiphene, because the clomiphene had the chlorine molecule in it, and that's the one that essentially sort of looks like or makes the M3 metabolite possible. That's what it comes from. There is going to be somebody who could be plausibly innocent and is not going to have the money to push through to arbitration, and they are going to eat an S sandwich on this one. And you are going to watch a world where someone ostensibly who, you know, bought, I don't want to say bought justice, but bought the kind of representation that gets you closer to justice, and somebody who can't, and they are going to be qualified and disqualified at the exact same time.
You're 100% right. That's why Jon Jones is the worst test case in this part, because we have the preconceived notion that he's a bad guy or whatever, that he probably did it anyway. That's why this is the worst case. If it was somebody with a clean slate, we'd be like, all right, let's let it play out. That's why each time this is going to keep popping up, it just feels worse.
And forget about the money as well, too. Like the status as well. Like not everyone is in the same level that Jon Jones is, and you saw it in the California State Athletic Commission help him out in the sense of like, hey, we're going to go to these experts, we're going to go to work for you. Hey, we already no one else that has popped for anything has USADA been like, okay, give me your test. I'm going to test it out with all these experts. We're going to get this thing whole situation fixed. No other fighter has experienced the same thing, and you know, even with the card move, it's all because of who Jon Jones is, and not many fighters have that status. So it is a tricky situation. As the longer it goes, and the more fighters say like pop for things, the weirder it's gonna get, because up to this point, before the Jon Jones thing, we've just seen USADA just, you know, throw down the hammer against anybody who's failed and suspend them for X amount of time. With Jon Jones kind of taking a step back a little bit, we'll see if they're going to continue to do so.
What happens in Nevada, Brian, with his hearing to get licensed? Do they put up a fight on this?
They're going to have to stand alone on the mountaintop, and are they going to lose fights if they do put up a fight? I mean, it's such a weird, sketchy situation.
You got another title fight on the card.
Kind of have to guess and assume they're going to fall in line and be like, well, if it's good enough for California and USADA, it's good enough for us. Does Nevada have the best reputation ever outside of standing for them that one day and saying, hey, all of our commission members are on vacation for Christmas right now, so that was surprising. But I don't know. I've seen a lot to know that Seeing too much, right?
Also, they already know that if they're not okay with putting up that title fight, the UFC can just, pick up
Right.
tent and go somewhere else and set up.
Well,
a
at this
fight
point, they
anywhere
could
else.
California's already
They
all
could
in.
redirect that fight now. Usually, what you don't want to happen is that to get close again, or have some kind of it all swell up the way it just did. But as long as they address it now, I don't really, Nevada has to do what you said. Nevada is now it falls under the scrutiny of making the decision, and we know how this is always one of these funny things because when Nevada is the voice of reason in a situation, it usually turns into folly. So
And somebody gets pregnant. That's what happens.
What happened? Who hurt you? That's what I want to know. Let me make a point here about this, which of course I'm going to. I was telling Chuck before this, if I've done anything about anti-doping in this sport, probably not much. But if I've done anything, I have tried to move the Overton window from the phony conversation that we have about what we really need is clean sport, which is this nonsensical idea that has no backing whatsoever, either historically or intellectually, to a more realistic point about what do we actually do now that these are all here? How do we handle it? We have to find a way to live with it because I got news for you. That's the reality. As I watch this, I just want to take one moment, if I may, on this. Understand what we are dealing with here. Be like, oh, we don't really fully understand Turinabol. No, you don't understand Turinabol at all. Worse, I want to make clear what has happened here. They have proposed a theory, which is all they have. Not even a theory, because you have to test a theory before it can actually become one. They have proposed a hypothesis, that what this is, well, here's what we know from super limited, by the way, we think one-person testing about this substance. We think it goes from these kinds of windows. It ends up going far beyond that. We kind of think that could be it. It reminds me of the undoing of bite mark science. You guys ever follow this? For years, they would treat in courts of law bite mark science as super authoritative. There would be a bite mark on a victim. They'd match it with the teeth. And it turned out under actual scrutiny, bite mark science is total junk science. There's virtually none of it that's real. If you died in a fire, they could use your teeth to identify you. But biting another object, it turns out that there's nothing to that at all. And people went to jail for that, man. So here's what to me, I have never seen a clearer example of a house of cards. Now, they are trying to err on the side of leniency, because people are like, well, they're taking care of the powerful. Well, maybe the UFC is catering to their stars. To me, USADA is caught here with their pants around their ankles, and they are saying uncle. They are saying uncle in broad daylight. And if you think that oral Turinabol is the only drug where they're willing to fudge things one way or the other, you are out of your mind. I am telling you, and I am right about this now. I will be right about this in 20 years. The science is not nearly as ironclad as it needs to be. It only happens to be, in this case, that they have to err on the side of discretion, which is, if someone took this to an arbitrator, we'd lose 10 times out of 10. So they're going a little bit light on John. I am telling you, they have gone the other way. They have gone hard on guys. They will do it again. This is not about oral Turinabol. This is about the way that they construct cases when they feel like it. This is about the state of science. They will fudge it and they will fuck someone going forward.
Wow.
Bank on it. Bank on it.
This guy's fired
Bank
up.
on it. I can't believe we have a house of cards like this in broad daylight in front of everybody, and people are still screaming about clean sport. It is a fairy tale. Give it up. All right.
Juice and give it up.
Give it up. No, I'm not saying juice. Find a way to live with it. It's here. It's never going away. It's going to be here the rest of the time you watch sports.
Can we just add to the unprecedented preferential treatment that Jon Jones is receiving? I mean, I'm not even over that they lessened his USADA suspension out of nowhere and said, well, we can't prove where the drug came from or if he took it, but, it's fine. He probably didn't use it. And look at how far down the road this is going. Yeah. At what point do angry people like Jermaine Durandamy, Nico Montano, Tom Lawler sit there, Steve Buscemi, and Billy Madison style and put on the lipstick and just glad I called that guy off the list, because these guys have been essentially screwed in the way they've been treated. And then you see somebody like Jon Jones just continually be like, it's fine.
They don't understand hardly anything. And they'll fudge it one way or the next based on some cockamamie hypothesis. If that doesn't make you shiver, if you're a fighter watching that, boy, you better rethink that one fast. All right. So, last comment on this. How much of a pre-fight narrative do you think this will actually be, assuming from now until fight time it doesn't come up again? Danny?
I mean, it's really the same thing that happened prior to UFC 232. So I I assume it's going to be something similar, but just lesser. And again, the more it happens, the more normal it's going to become. I mean, we just saw on Twitter it wasn't really a big deal when literally the same thing happened just a few months ago and Twitter exploded. So at this point, as long as they can keep that answer and we don't have any more, tests, any more evidence on this substance, it's just going to be the same thing. It's just going to become more and more normal, really.
They're normalizing guys testing positive. Isn't that wild?
It's like the red flag at half-mast. So the red flag hoisted up really slow. I don't know if something else will happen, given Jon Jones, you're not sure if something will happen that will steer the narrative into some other dark corner of his whole story, or if it'll end up just being a small part of this buildup. But I guarantee it's going to stay with him as long as those things are showing up on his test. This will be a part of his story.
Any final words?
No.
For once?
I will say, though, out on the road today, I saw a dying fetus sticker on a Cadillac.
Lucky you.
Little voice inside my head, though, right?
Oh,
Don't
here we
look
go.
back.
Was it a grotesque impalement sticker? That's one of their better albums. All right, so let's move on to the next one. UFC on ESPN Plus is now over. Everyone has kind of talked this topic to death. Was the main event stopped early? And what about Greg Hardy's future? Well, I'm not going to get so much into the minutia of that, but we do have a couple of things that were kind of interesting. The numbers came out. Their ratings were great. Best numbers they've seen since 2013 on cable TV. Obviously, they weren't on ESPN at the time, but just generally speaking, that was for the prelims. They apparently added close to 600,000 subscribers for the service. Now, I'm sure there'll be an attrition rate where some cancel. Brian, you've worked at the mothership before. You got to imagine they're pretty happy with this. What kind of grade would you give, now that some of the metrics are in, that first event?
From the success factor, this is an A. I mean, this was a slam dunk in terms of ratings, a slam dunk in terms of the numbers that they're able to flaunt of subscriptions that increase because of it, which is the point of acquiring the MMA rights and overpaying for them as you're launching a streaming network to find destination viewing that you have to subscribe for because you care that much about it. All that is a success, and it still proves what we know in this sports business landscape, that the homepage for sports fans is still, in a lot of ways, ESPN and SportsCenter TV, right? That's still the funnel point where you access this stuff. So while it's not like ESPN and SportsCenter is new to talking about UFC, but now that they have the financial interest, it's going to be more front page news. More people are going to randomly run into it. It seemed like a giant success. I mean, did you guys feel that from the actual tone of the broadcast?
Yeah, I thought so. I mean, I thought it was a success. Talking to people, obviously in Brooklyn who were at ESPN, I felt like there was a vibe that they had hit a home run, that type of thing. But of course, they may want to give that off anyway. But we were watching in the back room as the telecast began, and of course, there was a college basketball going on. I think that they said that number was somewhere near 4 million. It was like 3.7 million on that. Under, so you get to almost 2 million by the time Cerrone is fighting Hernandez in that main event for the prelim. That's pretty good, man. That is pretty good. I wasn't sure. I felt like I couldn't even speculate as to what that number would be, given that we've talked about kind of the difference between Fox and ESPN, the kind of lived-in feel of all sports and all-encompassing and part of the exclusive club of ESPN and all that stuff. Well, now we got a good indication. I thought that was a really good number. And if there's subscription, I'm guessing these subscriptions are documented and legit, but 600,000. You're right. It's the whole point of
that would be more than Fight Pass.
Exactly, and I feel like that's the whole point of this. And if that's the actual number, and that was all caused from one UFC event, that's a slam dunk, man.
And it did feel good for guys like us who used to work at ESPN during a time when MMA was not getting a push and it was very hands-off. To see that come full circle, guys like the late Anthony Mormile, Karen Portley, who were champions behind it. John Anik mentioned it on the broadcast. To see it come around, it did feel good to see the sport get that.
A lot of people in that scaffolding. There really are.
Yeah, full stamp of legitimization. Not that it's, it's just...
And to add to what Chuck was saying, on that article that, Dave Meltzer wrote over at MMAfighting.com, I believe the percentage for males, I think the demographic was from 18 to 34. So like 69% that were watching the basketball game, the college basketball game, stuck around to watch the prelims. Same thing with like the female audience. I think it was like 66%. So part of the reason why the UFC wants to be on ESPN is to catch all these sports fans, right, that are perhaps not exposed to the UFC all that much. Well, you got your answer there. If people are just watching basketball, sports fans, right? They see another athletic competition popping up, which is fighting, and they're sticking around. And it's a success.
That's something I meant to mention last time. One of the things about ESPN that's completely different from Fox and everything is it's just an idle station. People will put it on ESPN and just leave it there. They don't even intend. It doesn't matter what
restaurants, bars,
exactly. They will just leave it on there in their homes. People a lot of times just put on ESPN. Whatever's on ESPN is what they're watching. That's a complete difference between Fox, because I felt like their programming was so varied and so different. You never knew, and I'm talking about the main Fox, but of course Fox Sports 1 was starting out. I don't think that people are idling as much on the channel, but ESPN has that built in where people will just leave it on, like you mentioned, any bar, any public place. But a lot of people just their living rooms. I've been in tons of people's homes where it's just they have it on ESPN and they're not really changing it. So that's another benefit for this whole. More eyeballs on UFC, I guess.
All right, so let's go down the line then. I would generally agree. I think A is a little high because there's a couple things that went wrong.
Well, from success factor A, could I critique certain elements of the broadcast? I mean, I certainly like the pacing. I like the creative idea of having a coach as a broadcaster on the air.
Yep.
I don't know if I love that you just copy and paste your Fox broadcast team. Not that I have anything against any of those members. They're all really good. But you're starting a new era. And to start a new era with the same old pieces that didn't have that slant.
I thought there would be a production refresh, and there wasn't. And again, I've mentioned this before. One of my colleagues who worked at Fox was like, well, yeah, it's the UFC producing. Right. Okay, so I expect some continuity, but it's also ESPN. It's new. It's the first one you've had in 7 years. I don't know. I kind of thought there would be something.
What would you have changed? Is there some element?
I think I would have rotated, just grandfathering in all the talent.
Yeah.
I thought was a little weird. I would have done a new graphics package. I certainly wouldn't have brought back Face the Pain. I mean, I don't know. I mean, I can't. You guys think it's a joke?
No,
it's truly the most indefensible broadcast.
Did they play it?
decision.
I didn't even.
Seriously, ask yourself, what is the least defensible broadcast decision in professional sports on a major national network? It is that, by far. It is the worst call. There's nothing you could bring up that would be worse. Not even having Skip Bayless. He doesn't do broadcasts of sports events. But he at least serves a purpose for FS1 and that embrace debate kind of production ethos. So it's so weird that they would do that.
And I'm not saying I want to go the full extreme and have Stephen A. Smith in the arena sitting on the desk as your voice.
I don't know why he's there. I mean, I get it. Like, he's super popular and it's audience continuity. I get that. You could have got that with Max Kellerman, and he would have been eminently more qualified. So to me,
It's the splicing of the times, right? Like you have a guy like that, and it's like, oh, this is an ESPN. It's like seeing both entities at work together.
By the way, sort of a side note, did you guys see Derek Carr hit up Dana White because he wanted to fight Max Kellerman in the UFC? Which I thought was kind of interesting. Anything you would have changed about what happened?
I like Kellerman in that fight.
Well, definitely Face the Pain to start off. Second of all, I think this is, whenever you get a big change like this, is a great opportunity to change things around. So I don't dislike the way the UFC is doing things now, but I do think it would have been a great opportunity to change things around.
Maybe
the graphics package would have been nice, just refresh the product.
Maybe there's a gradual unveil that they're thinking, but you think about just even the belt changing and how much negative criticism that drew just from an aesthetic standpoint. You're like, I think of sometimes if you're just going to do something, maybe you do it always like ripping the Band-Aid off and you're like, here's our new platform, or maybe you gradually do that, but I don't know what their intention is.
Yeah.
But maybe we will see things as we go along here.
Probably.
Yeah, you also got to cater to two worlds, because you bring the guy like, Stephen A. Smith, who, somebody that's not used to watching UFC and other sports go, okay, I recognize that guy and will stick around for the broadcast, right? Because it's somewhat familiar. You also got to cater to the fans that have been watching for forever. They don't want the UFC that they're, accustomed to watching to be something completely different and have a completely different experience. So it is a weird step, but I assume, and I hope this is the case, that throughout this partnership, they're going to keep making changes.
Here's the thing. It's like you brought in Trevor Whitman. He was such a great addition.
He was.
But I think we talked about this on the Monday show. They haven't quite figured out how to bring him in, but they at least made that call. Having all the same production elements, just a swapping of the logo, felt a little bit, I don't want to call it lazy, because they went all out to promote this, but I don't know.
It felt really nerdy here. Would you like them to go as far as maybe having like red octagon walls because it's the ESPN era, or at least remember UFC 200, there was the yellow canvas.
Like a different, how they kind of, I mean, they did it for McGregor, and I'm sure it was expensive, but how that kind of lighting they did on the octagon mat. I don't know, something like another twist. Here's what I will say, no one's really talking about it, man. They made, the ratings that we talked about, the television ratings, were obviously ended up being at the end of Cerrone. But overall, you got to feel like, I don't know, that might be one of the more talked about flyweight fights I can remember ever. Yeah. Like, think about it. Even when Demetrius is out there beating some of the more interesting guys, I don't remember it having this kind of lingering effect. And then the controversy of the main event. I know it's cold comfort for TJ Dillashaw. I think it's been pretty good for the overall event. Like,
it's everything you suspected about Cejudo having star power, and then Dillashaw kind of bringing that out. We talked about this, and I think it played out perfectly in that sense.
So I'll give ESPN credit, man. They made a flyweight fight about as big as it's going to be.
Dude, and they promoted the hell of it. I remember just going on, because I don't have cable, right? But just going on YouTube, like, it was...
This millennial.
Just going on YouTube, like, I could already see, like, on the home screen, there was already, promotions about it all over social media. So... They did a pretty good job at it, to reaching out to these.
It's also worth mentioning, you had one UFC event in January. This is what happens sometimes when you have one event in a month.
That's true.
Yeah, they went all out. Look, I don't get me wrong. I think it's a B+, A- scenario. It's a definite high grade. I thought they did really well. But if they weren't going to make this the rip the Band-Aid off moment, I'd like to see some continued, at least experimentation.
Yeah.
Maybe one thing a broadcast, just kind of figure it out. Especially when they get to the situation where Kane is going to be fighting Francis, where that's the full-on ESPN experience. I want to make sure by the time we get there, we've got, I don't know, it should feel a little different.
I don't know. I feel like they kind of are making changes. The belt, adding Trevor Whitman. They don't want to experiment too much, but there is some experimentation going on.
You know what the thing about the last thing about this, and we'll move on. What's funny about the belt is, like, when I was editor-in-chief of Bloody Elbow 10 years ago, I remember that we would do occasional refreshes on the front, and I would be privy to the refresh from the tech designers who were designing it. They'd be like, here's why we're putting this here, and here's why we're putting this here. I'd be like, dude, they are gonna love this. And then we'd roll out the refresh, and every comment, what are you idiots doing? You morons, you've ruined the experience. So I can't tell if I don't like the belt or if I'm just now one of those people who doesn't like the refresh.
So, change is hard.
Change is hard. Change is very hard. I acknowledge it.
Well, the change is a downgrade. That's why we don't like it. Let's be really honest.
It's just a rejiggering of your hardwiring of convenience.
Yeah, yeah.
That's why people don't like it. So I'm going to say generally, I'm going to give the ESPN and UFC first run pretty high marks. I thought it was, if not a home run, stand-up triple. Yeah. It was very, very good. Which brings us to the other side of things. I'm going to do a little switch for the boys in the back. We'll put Khabib and Conor just in a minute, but let's talk about Bellator 214. I want to get to it at the meat of the show here. It is this weekend. It is going to be in Inglewood, California, at the Forum, which is where Jon Jones last fought. Kind of interesting.
Where Cheeto Ortiz last fought.
That's right. That's right.
Look at it.
Here's the funny thing about this, Chuck.
UFC 233 was supposed to take place.
That's right. That's right. Here's the funny thing about it. Man, they lucked out at first, right? Because it was going to, 233 was going to be down the road.
Same area. Same market.
Same market. And then it fell apart, and then Scott Coker, who apparently his new habit is to subtweet, which has been...
Dude, his Twitter, man.
It's blowing up. It's kind of interesting. Yeah. So they lucked out, but then they lost their main event. I got to be honest, what do you think would be better? For them to have the main event back while the UFC is competing, or this scenario?
Oh, man. I like this scenario, honestly.
Okay.
I like, the card itself kind of has a vintage Coker feel, which is, it's got some novelty to it, it's got a prospect to it, and it's got the legend to it, right? Like it's got the Fedor, if you go back to the Strikeforce days, there was a lot of cards that were structured like this. So it strikes me as we enter 2019, one of those types of cards. And I love the fact that he's subtweeting. Back in the day, 10 years ago, it was when Verdum beat Emelianenko. It was who was subtweeting then? Who was doing the thing? It was a smiley face from Dana White. Now you get kind of a reverse. It's funny. A decade later,
it's funny,
and you see you see Coker kind of taking his shots. To me, this is part of what makes it fun. And this is a rare moment for Bellator to shine because there was supposed to be a UFC event with this, basically chased out of town for a number of reasons, but Bellator's presence being one of them. So I feel like they've got a nice card. I mean, I'm intrigued by the card on all three of the fights for very, very different moods and reasons. But I dig the card. It feels like the vintage Coker era back at Strikeforce to me.
What do you think?
In some ways, I'm kind of glad that this is the only main MMA event going on this weekend because it is important, man. Either you will get Fedor as a champion, which it's something for sure, or you get Ryan Bader as a champ, and there should be media attention towards that, right? Because once you have two events, media outlets are going to have to split their time, the amount of coverage they can hand out. So this is a big card, and I'm glad it's getting the attention that it's getting now.
You like this scenario?
I love this. I love them to get that spotlight, and you nailed it with this is a can't-lose main event in terms of entertainment, in terms of what you can do with the winner, in terms of creating possibly a moment for somebody. This has been a very successful tournament that has played out, I think, absolutely perfectly. I mean, Anytime no one gets injured, it's perfect. But I think who's won, who's advanced, and now the two potential
this is their
paths.
ideal. They had to have these two guys circled and hope that they get together. So
let's talk about this for just a second. It's a shame you're not getting Lovato versus Mousasi for that middleweight title, but neither here nor there. I guess they'll do that a little bit later in the year. What you are going to get, as everyone has noted here, is Fedor is going to be fighting Ryan Bader. The finals of the heavyweight Grand-Prix. I think we all agree that maybe the heavyweight finals took a little bit too long to wind its way through the year, but in the end, you got something that's better. Legend versus, not newcomer, but somebody who's still relatively in their prime, as you noted. Either the legend wins or you get a champ. Either way, it's something you can market. Let's start with the legend, though. I was looking this up today, 42 years old. Everyone's talking about Tom Brady because the world is awful. And everyone all of a sudden is a Patriots fan. And so they were talking about, wow, if you were, if you were in 2001 and your child was 2 years old, they would be a freshman in college now as he heads back into the Super Bowl. And that was his first one, was 2001. Well, Fedor made his MMA debut in 2000. Here we are in 2019. You could have watched you could have been born on his pro debut, and you could still be watching him fight against pretty elite competition. I find that utterly remarkable, especially because this is the most active he's been since 2011 or so. 3 fights, not in a year in the sense that they all happened in 2018, but if you just look at it, he fought, I think, in April of 2018, and now here in January of 2019. 3 fights in pretty close succession, and he's on the precipice of something. We talked about this before, Danny. Let's get back to it. If he beats Ryan Bader, legitimately, what does that do for his resume? Because we weren't sure before.
Yeah.
I'm pretty sure now it does a lot.
Oh, for sure. And I've touched on this way before the tournament started. Like, if Fedor manages to win the belt, what a way to clean up his career, because there's no doubt that he's one of the greatest heavyweights out there. There's no doubt that he's, achieved amazing things. But he did hit a slump where, the Fabio Maldonado fight wasn't so great. He had a few other fights here and there that he won, but, still didn't look great. Now he's in Bellator, which is a pretty legit organization. He's fighting top-notch, talent. Man, if he wins the belt and hopefully, retires, that'd be amazing for his career. Like, what a way to clean it up, because for being one of the greatest, he did look like he was going down that road of like that Chuck Liddell road where things were kind of just turning ugly, but now they're not. They kind of took a turn for the right thing. So
it's been 7 years since his career really turned ugly. Like, it's really been a long time. So to come all the way back, you nailed it. When this tournament started, it was like, oh, if he won it, that'd be a nice cherry on top to end of it. Now it's the full damn cherry pie, right? Yeah. Tastes so good, make a grown man cry. I mean, if you want to go that far. And the whole point is because this ain't Jeff Monson that he's going to be in there against. This ain't washed Fabio Maldonado even. This is Ryan Bader, who, if he wins, we could be talking about a legitimate top 5 heavyweight contender in the world right now. And we could talk about a resurrection of his career and a full chapter 2 and a champ. But if Fedor beats him, man, it's a little bit bigger than Mir, a little bit bigger than fighting middleweight Chael Sonnen. This is the big deal.
Ryan Bader feels like he's only come into his own of the last few years, right? Like, he's all of a sudden turned that corner where he is that guy that maybe his potential was you were pointing towards early on in the run through tough and all that. So if he beats Bader, it would almost be more like you'd have to go way back in Fedor's career for a victory like that. You'd have to go way back even before like the affliction shows and things like that. I think you'd have to go back to Big Nog or something like that. It'll have to be like one of those type of fights, because this is the most doubt going into a fight that he's probably had. Yeah. Even through his hard period, because if you looked at it, the Verdum one, he was a huge favorite. Bigfoot Silva, I think probably people thought he was going to rebound. There was a good chance he'd rebound that fight. He gets blasted in that fight.
Dan Henderson was
kind of 50-50 because Dan coming up to heavyweight and was barely getting to heavyweight. So all those fights had their own strange asterisks to them. But this one, I'm like, I think most people who watch the sport think that Ryan Bader's going to walk all over this old, washed-up Fedor Emelianenko. But so if he wins this, it's going to feel like we just reopened his mystique, I feel like. It's going to be that. I think it'll have that kind of feeling. All that nostalgia that's been pent up for years, the people who've been like, the GOAT status assigned him for that 28 fight unbeaten streak between 2001 and 2009, comes gushing out. I really believe if he gets through this and he does a spectacular, like a knockout, or maybe he gets in trouble like he used to, and then he comes through with a big punch. I mean, I think the lid's going to come off that place.
So if he wins, does Vadim subtweet Dana then? Little old school M1 joke for
M1 is working with UFC in Russia. So
How about that?
How about that, son?
But the cool nature about this fight is it's not a 50-50 fight, right? Because Bader's rightfully favored.
Right. Yeah.
But Bader's weakness against really big opponents is the one-punch KO. So this fight's going to be hella fun for 5 minutes.
That's what's fun about it, yeah.
Yet at the same time, it really does a lot for Bader because I think he's figured out that maybe his career this whole time should have been at heavyweight. Maybe he was building this whole point to find out that at heavyweight, he's got size, he's quick, he can wrestle, he can do some things that heavyweights can't. I don't want to overblow this Mitrione thing too much, and yes, it's Bellator, it's not UFC, but he has an opportunity to do a Cormier-like leap winning the Strikeforce Grand-Prix, the Andre Ward-like Super 6 leap into our consciousness and say, he's legit now. Not
I feel like Ryan Bader could easily be a top 10 heavyweight in the UFC, even a top 5 if you look at the rankings. So this is, and Bader's way to the tournament, like he beat, Frank Mir, which there's questions there, Chael Sonnen, which there's questions there. There's literally no questions about Ryan Bader. If you get past Ryan Bader,
true,
you're legit, because this guy could easily be he left the UFC being a top 3, top 4 light heavyweight, and I think he's, one of the best heavyweights out there right now, so.
I will say that with Ryan Bader, I feel bad for guys like that because they have one big crazy loss in their career that always sticks with them. You can always think about it, but I always think back to UFC 132 where he's supposed to steamroll Tito Ortiz, and Tito Ortiz is all of a sudden doing his little gravedigger dance. And so I always think back to that, and I'm thinking,
would this be like that, though? I don't know that this would be like that. Tito
because
back
streak. Then, yes,
he's on a winning streak, Fedor's.
That was more about Tito getting snatching a victory out of everybody thought he was going to lose. They just thought he was on the outs. So he wins, and you're like, whoa, where did that come from? Because everybody wanted him to then fight at UFC 133, and I think he did against Rashad, right? In the rematch.
Yeah,
so it's like they wanted a quick turn. It was like this a whole different setup. But this one, I feel like Bader, it's a different setup. But I'm only pointing out that it recalls that the Bader has slipped in a big moment before, and that's part of his storyline. So that just comes into play. That's all.
Got it. I was trying to figure out what would it mean to be the champ of Bellator. In other words, if I asked you what it meant to be the champ of UFC, it feels like something regal and oh my God. And I don't want to diminish the one what it means for Bellator, but I don't know that it would. I'm not suggesting it does or it doesn't. I'm asking, not telling. I don't know that it substantially alters pay or alters pay at all, for that matter. That could be a little bit unclear. It certainly is historic if you become that. Beyond that, though, it's the same scenario where it's like it's a cool thing. But it doesn't meaningfully augment your pay, I don't believe. And then how are you going to defend it? Now, maybe it's easier to defend in Bellator than UFC in terms of the scheduling. Mm-hmm. But, guys, if I put into the table here, what is the significance of being the Bellator champ?
I feel like this is mainly going for Ryan Bader's legacy because he missed so many opportunities in the UFC. Because in the UFC, sure, you have to be skilled, but there's also so many other things involved for you to get, that opportunity, that big opportunity. Here in Bellator, for the most part, sure, talking's important as well, but if you can fight and win, you have a straight path to the title, right? And here, he would become the first champ, right? Roy McDonald attempted that. He wasn't successful. So for one, you're making history. And two, probably being a champ in the light heavyweight and heavyweight division is an easier task than being at any other weight classes, because Ryan Bader has talked about it. He's like, I'm not putting on extra weight. I'm just, training, and I'm just not doing the weight cut pretty much, but I'm walking around 230.
Oh, no, that gap between light heavy and real heavyweight has to be wider than the gap between bantamweight and featherweight, right?
Well, it has to be wider, but in the sense of competition,
yeah, that's right.
I feel like you can compete very comfortably at 230 and be very successful. Like, look at Cain Velasquez. Not a big dude at all, and he could probably compete at maybe 205.
He does have a large head, though.
He does,
I've seen him in person.
Yeah, he does.
Grande cabeza.
I mean, Bader's big as well, so I feel like this is a very doable task for him to be like, all right, what are all the champs doing? Sure, they're conquering the belt, but has anyone defended the belts? I can do that.
The great thing about Ryan Bader is, I think most people would agree that he'd never got his shot in the UFC. So you look at it psychologically, you think he wasn't a washout of the UFC. He wasn't a guy that you're like, oh, he couldn't make it there. Now he made it in the UFC. He had a winning record. He was great there.
Title shot.
He just never, exactly.
He lost every step of it.
He never got
a title shot.
Sorry, I was thinking.
He actually never even got a main event on a pay-per-view. He was never even the B side of something like that. He was never anything. They just never gave him that kind of push. So it almost feels like, hey, he went over there and resurrected himself the way he thought he should. And here he is. So it has a different feel from a typical former UFC fighter. It feels like a guy who's finally getting his fair share.
It's almost like Dan Henderson going to Strikeforce, resurrecting himself, beating Fedor, and then coming back to UFC for big money and big opportunity. Yeah. If Bader has a vision of one day coming back to UFC as a heavyweight for big money and a main event role, then I think the the significance is for him financially more than anything else.
Yeah, it's interesting. It's like if you can't get the push you think you need in UFC and you go to another organization, it's like when they finally succeed there, it's like that's how they saw themselves all this time. It's interesting to consider. Also on that card, Aaron Pico is back. Aaron Pico might be one of the nicest guys in sport. I love talking to him because he has this sort of quiet, brooding energy that you know is a tempest in a teapot, but when he unleashes it, it's a nightmare to watch for his opponents. However, on the other hand, I haven't quite seen him turn that corner. Do we feel, Danny, that there's been lasting negative effects from having that faltered debut? In other words, I recognize that to be a star in sport, it just takes time. It took Anderson Silva so long before he became a star. So I'm not suggesting he'll never be a star. Far from it. What I am saying is he still kind of living in that shadow of that botched debut?
I don't think so at all. I think the biggest talk was look at his last fight, dismantling Leandro Higo, right? Former title challenger, had over 20 plus fights in his record. I think it was like 18-4 or something like that, 18-3 at the time. I think Aaron Pico, and he said it. He's like, I'm out there to be the youngest champion ever.
Yeah.
Dude, I think he can achieve that. Just the way he's progressing from fight to fight is just ridiculous. He's got a good camp. The dude is somewhat like TJ Dillashaw, reminds me in the sense of like he's just constantly like in competition mode, which that's something great to have if you want to be a professional fighter. I don't think his debut is not even a thing anymore because the fighter that he was then is not the fighter that he is now. He's improving so much. Honestly, 5 fights in his professional MMA career, no amateur experience, he could easily be competing for the title. And I feel like even if he lost, he would look, at par. He'll look like he belongs in there. So I don't think that's clouding this at all.
Brian, if he wins, my belief is that he will be fighting for a title in this fight after that.
He will be. And you have to realize how much Bellator has invested in him, going back to his high school days. I think he's fully recovered from the loss mentally, which is the most important. His interview is very strong. You can tell the wisdom there because that would have train wrecked a lot of guys. I'm still a little worried physically, though, because when you see him, sure, he's got a run of knocking out jobber-level talent, but he gets hit.
Leandro Higo is a very good fighter.
Pre-Higo, obviously. He gets hit. So I have those flashes of, do I want to see a little more seasoning so we don't ruin this? Because, by the way, I really want him to succeed. I'd love to see the idea of a phenom, a homegrown Bellator phenom, rise up in the rankings and find out how good he can be. I love everything about Aaron Pico. I just want to make sure you don't push him too fast before technique, strategy-wise, everything comes together and he's fully ready.
I think he's the closest thing that Bellator has ever had to like a guy with a true it factor. The thing that they're bringing up where it's like he's a Bellator product that has that sense to him that he is going to do something in the mixed martial arts worlds that could be transcendent in weird ways. He has that feeling. He's always had that feeling, even after that loss. And I remember Bellator officials backstage, because remember Michael Chandler lost on that card too. And I remember asking him, like, I said, what's worse, the Michael Chandler loss, like losing, like having him lose, or Aaron Pico? And all of them were like, dude, Aaron Pico, that's because they thought that was a slam dunk. And I think that, they're not going to admit that. But I think that the thought was he's going to kick off his reign then. It got set back, but I feel like we're firmly in it now. He's got a veteran guy he's facing. I think it's the perfect matchup for him at this point in time. Henry Carlos, right? He's won like 4 or 5. He's won like 4 or 5 fights in a row. He's a tough dude. I think that it'll be, if he showcases well, I feel like we're going to be entering into that space a little bit because they do get this nice no competition weekend. I feel like people will be paying attention to the fight, and he's going. If he does what he's been doing, he takes a huge step forward, and I think he has that potential to be their guy. I mean, their guy at the very top of the food chain.
Let me ask you a bearded question here for a second. If Pico becomes who we think he can be and want him to be, how does Bellator keep him long term? Ownership stake? What do they do? Get into zone, swim with that money? What do they do to keep him?
I'm not sure. Sign people to bring him over, let him do boxing matches, let him go
pro wrestling.
Do some kind of, or amateur wrestling for money or something.
Unlimited picograms, whatever you want to
say. Dude, he should have his last name be, or his nickname be Grams. Aaron Picograms.
That occurred to me.
I'm sure it's occurred to every idiot on Twitter, but I'm not sure. That's a challenge that Scott Coker's going to have. That's one. I don't think they really have to worry about that right now because I think even he recognizes.
Yeah, it's still.
It's good to have the win at your back in terms of your matchmaker because Henry Corrales is an interesting choice because he's fought the best that division has to offer and came up short against the better ones. However, to your point, he is a pretty formidable striker, bites down the mouthpiece kind of guy too when he needs to be. So if Pico's not careful, Corrales is not the guy to play too many games with. And he can sleep people too. So he's got a lot of knockouts on his record. He's a very, very interesting test. Pico, if he fights up to his potential, should win this no problem. But he's got to fight up to his potential. I think that's sort of the interesting
Maybe
part.
he's been more reckless against lesser competition, but I don't feel he had any legs to stand on to be reckless at all coming off of that first
The
one.
thing was, the aggression that he went after Leandro Higo with. I was like, I couldn't believe it.
You would think a knockout like in his debut, like he had, it would pull him back a little bit, but
No. Last thing on this, Ricky Bandejas, who beat, who is the very, I like him.
Gallagher?
James Gallagher. You know, I've met James Gallagher in person. He actually is the sweetest kid. People don't think that because all you see on TV is this like over-the-top brash guy, but in person it's the total opposite. So in any event, he got his comeuppance for getting in Bandejas' face. Bandejas, of course, had that legendary win. He's back in action against a very, very challenging Juan Archuleta. So 3 fights on that card. Definitely pay attention to. It's actually a pretty good card in the
AJ Agazarm's making his MMA debut.
On that card?
On that
On the
card, yeah.
prelims,
The
though,
prelims,
right?
yeah.
Yeah, that's right. AJ Agazarm. Who?
Jack Swacker, what?
Yeah, you're just not going to Jake Hager us? Come
See,
on.
this is why it's like Coker or card, because back in the day you had Herschel Walker or Bobby Lashley. You had always had that guy who was getting his chance.
Here's my attitude about
You know
it.
what I mean?
I have no strong opinion one way or the other. Before I condemn or before I praise, I would like to see how he looks.
Yeah.
Right,
You know?
of
So
course.
to me, it's
I
interesting.
mean, he's fighting the guy who puts the cheese inside the hot dogs at my local gas station.
Yeah.
We got to be honest.
You know, he's probably going to be fighting a
Be fooled by that 0-1 record, bro.
Look, if Coker is smart, and he is, he booked him against a pre-diabetic, whatever. But the point being is,
Wow, that was harsh, right?
no, I'm making it a point. He's getting favorable matchmaking, but I don't have a strong opinion one way or the other. I just want to see, and so, but the thing about it, he came from WWE, great.
But what's his end
Does
game?
nothing for, huh?
Is his end game Bobby Lashley? What's his end game?
I don't know. We'll see let's see how good he is. Maybe he's actually good enough to contend for a title, right?
Maybe.
Because he did wrestle collegially, if I'm not
Out of
mistaken.
5,000, get in the gym, bro. Get in the gym.
Yeah, don't.
Coker does well with the small picture stuff. Yeah, we always talk about big pictures. Small picture stuff is Coker's game too. Like he'll just book something just to have it on a specific event with no real idea of what's going to happen beyond that.
Yeah, all right, so let's transition if we can. Let's talk about the latest in McGregor and Khabib news. First of all, I just find it hilarious that, what was it, UFC 229 was October 6th, if I'm not mistaken. So let's see, November 6th, December 6th, January 6th. We're now, almost 10 to 11, 12 weeks past, not quite 12, but certainly 10 or 11 weeks past the point where that fight happened, and we still don't have any disciplinary finality about this.
they're reviewing the tape, Luke.
Yeah.
My
And
God.
the longer we wait, the closer we get
But it's
to.
all going to be grandfathered anyway. So
Yeah,
it's like as soon as retroactive, it's all going to be
Exactly.
like retroactive, so it won't matter.
I understand, but if you knew what the punishment was going to be a while ago, you could at least begin to think about what you're going to do for matchmaking in a more serious way. So it's just, I find it so annoying that these chin-stroking commissions is like, we have to really consider the evidence. Just give them a punishment. Stop lying. All right, in any event. So there's that. I guess that's coming up, next week, if I'm not mistaken? Some kind of resolution about that?
Yeah.
Pretty close anyway. It's not what I want to talk about. Let me make one brief comment. We're not even going to discuss on the show. I'm going to say one thing. There are rumors floating out there about Conor McGregor being involved in an alleged incident. I get email after email after email asking me why no one is discussing it. This is all I'm going to say right now. I have no affiliation with that team. Hell, their coach blocked me on Twitter. I've never asked for an interview. I don't know these people, so I'm not saying this because these are my friends. I do not discuss the certainty or the value of news that comes from WhatsApp. That is how you get fake news. When these rumors that have been circulating about him, if and when they ever become real, then we will discuss them. Until then, they are just things I will not pay attention to. Not saying it's true, not saying it's not true. I'm saying it's nothing that we can substantively discuss. And that's all I'm going to say about it. Now, moving along from that part, there is Conor news. Tweeting about old Donald Cerrone. Here was my question. He's tweeted about a number of people. Good fight. I really respect these two warriors getting after it. But tweeting Cerrone, why would he tweet Cerrone? Because before he was looking for a rematch, that appears to have died down, Danny.
Yeah.
And now he's sort of like trying to figure out what the right place to go next is. You can say, he would pick Cerrone because it'd be an exciting fight, but that's not it. Why is Conor targeting a Cerrone fight? What is it in for him?
I think he's looking at several things. One, he wants to fight somebody that has some sort of stature, right? Somebody that has some sort of name. Somebody that, because sure, he's going to be always the A side, whoever he fights, but the B-side does provide, a little bit of a push. Don Cerrone is that guy. He's a fan favorite. He's a guy that we've seen fight a number of times. Also, he just came off fighting a very tough wrestler. I'm not sure if he wants to do that again. And sure, Don Cerrone can wrestle. We saw it in the Patrick Cote, but, we can easily say that he's perhaps not as credentialed, as a Khabib or somebody else. So from that standpoint, it's a favorable matchup. And two, and three, Cerrone's just coming off a big moment. It's not like, if Cerrone would have lost this fight, I think it would have been very different. But man, he proved that he's still legit. He fought 2 wins in a row against two young guys. We're right, Mike Perry, young guy, Alex Hernandez, young guy. So he's still there. And I feel like fans, that's a fight that fans would like to see. So he knows he has to get back in there. He knows he has to build himself up. He can't just gun for these, high level fights.
It's a very nice way of saying what this is. It's a tune-up fight.
It's a tune-up fight.
UFC doesn't do tune-up fights or get-wells. This is a celebrity get-well fight that you can main event a pay-per-view with. It'll do big business. Yes, Conor can lose. Yes, it will be violent and exciting, so people will tune in no matter what. But it's a favorable style. When is Cerrone the most vulnerable? A, when he's washed, and it still kind of is, by the way. And B, when he's active. He wants to fight every month, and that's when he ends up catching a loss or two. This is perfect. This is smart. This is genius matchmaking. This is who Conor should be going after to rebuild his own mojo.
I don't agree with you. He's washed. I don't agree.
I don't think he's washed either.
Washed from the elite. Washed is a term people hate to use. I end up using it a lot as a joke. I understand why people get upset.
Washed means past.
Right.
He's not past.
Washed means
there's levels of
wash means that person can't win.
You're right. There's levels to this. He's not elite anymore. Okay?
Take that back, Brian Campbell.
Take that back.
One of the
Still pretty good.
Yeah.
One of the fun things about this sport is that every time there's a fight card of any bigness, any kind of event type of thing, you're going to get an enamored audience. In that moment of being enamored with whoever just won or whoever just did something, there are masters who jump in and they manipulate that space and they capture that moment and they make it a thing, right? So Conor McGregor did the exact right thing. He jumped in at the most enamored moment for Cowboy Cerrone right after coming through in maybe one of his better performances ever, right? Jumps in there. Probably already had him circled because he's a big picture guy. Already had him circled we have this heat that goes back to what the 2015 Go Big press conference thing. There's
stiff as a board.
Right. There's that whole thing, and he just knew when to get in there. And I agree with everything you just said. It's a fight he should win. It's a stylistic matchup that he probably wants. It's a stature fight that he can sell and it will sell itself. I think that all those components is just. Big picture McGregor just was
big picture McGregor.
Jump in on the perfume of everybody's celebrating Cerrone and throw that in there right then. It was kind of a masterstroke.
I love when he agrees with me. I love that.
It's a good way to put it because we were just talking about the ratings. Almost 2 million people were watching Don Cerrone versus Hernandez. So it's a pretty important time to capitalize on that. And also the way he did it too. Because I feel like with that fight, Cerrone kind of he got a lot of love from the fans. It kind of felt like the Jose Aldo beating Jeremy Stevens in that sense, the old dog coming out there and proving that he still belongs. And the way Conor McGregor went about it wasn't like, hey, you suck, I'm gonna beat your ass, nothing like that. He was like, hey, congrats. He was very complimentary, which I feel like that went well with the fans.
There's a high ceiling for what this pay-per-view could do, by the way.
What do you think it
Hell
do?
yeah.
I think with no effort, it does $1 million.
Let's say the rest of the card is nubs.
These days, just to do $1 million, it's not like this isn't prime Floyd Mayweather Pacquiao era where any fight does $1 million. $1 million does a lot these days, and I think with doing zero promotion, it does $1 million. And I think if it gets really juicy, you have that video to throw back to. If Cowboy is willing to go all the hell out in being a trash talker. I mean, this is going to be.
We kind of saw it with Alex Hernandez, which was very.
He didn't like it. That's the thing. It's like, if you didn't like it when Alex Hernandez did it, boy, you are going to hate it when.
Do you know how many people hate Conor on the polarizing level? They want to see this be the nail in the coffin, and Cowboy's the beer drinking dude that you embrace.
Here's my only question, Brian: is this desire to get the Cowboy fight? Is this a pivot, or is this a path back to the title?
Path back to the title.
Okay,
I think both. Right? It's got to be both.
Can't be both.
Well,
is he in a new space where that's the kind of opponent he's looking for? Or is he looking to use that to get back?
You could look at it both ways, though. I mean,
that's why I'm asking, because I don't know the answer.
I like when you two fight. We don't get enough of it.
No, I'm not fighting. I'm simply saying he's right.
Yeah.
I don't. That's why I'm asking, because I don't know which one it is.
I think it does both because Cerrone was former title challenger. He's still a contender at lightweight. So if you pick up a win over him, it definitely puts you up in the rankings. But Cerrone's also. I don't want to say he falls in the money weight division, but in a sense, he's this character that he can just be in fun fights. You know what I'm saying?
Cerrone would have more merit right now than Nate Diaz did the first time that McGregor fought him. And that you saw how that turned out. That still was an elite status, like considered elite status, stepping stone for whatever he was going to do. I feel like Cerrone certainly right now fills out, going against your wash statement, he certainly fills out he fills out that bill. So he could be. I would look at it more like that's still his path back into the title conversation, because I think that that's how a lot of people would view it. But you could see the other way too. You could see like. There's been a couple times I've won. We were starting to write Cowboy's eulogy, and then all of a sudden he shows up with Mike Perry and beats him, and then does this again. He gets back on a roll. So I feel like it is kind of both, but I would lean towards that this is probably his path right back into a title shot.
Yeah. Well, last thing on this is the Khabib side of the story. He spoke to the boys at Submission Radio down in Australia. Said something kind of interesting. He said he would want his last 3 fights to be Tony Ferguson, George St. Pierre, and Mayweather. Maybe not in that order, but those 3, and then retire. Here's what caught my eye. Number 1, when he had that rib injury, he thought about retiring. After he beats McGregor, he talks about retiring. Now he's like, well, I'll finish these out and then I'll retire. Chuck, is Khabib closer to retirement than we really recognize?
I feel like we go through this with so many guys. Like George St. Pierre was always on the verge of retiring, and Anderson Silva for a long time was like, this could be it, man.
Fedor's retiring this weekend.
I always feel like this is just a ploy really to get like more money or to get people to, to bend over a little more and do whatever to meet your demands. But ultimately, I'm like, he's fought so infrequently overall over the last few years. I feel like he's probably, out of all those guys, got the most years left if he wants them. Obviously, we know he's
30, yeah.
Yeah, he's 30. He's still young enough, but he's taken some damage, but he doesn't take a ton of damage in his fights. I just think that, and he's so good at what he does. I know he has the strong convictions and beliefs and things like that. So maybe he's operating a little bit more on a different moral scale and timetable than we would really know about. But I think the money's too big. When the money gets this big, you don't say like, okay, time to get out of here. I think that, especially for a guy like him who's that dominant, you're going to find ways to keep getting paid. And so I feel like he's.
Well, to counter the money's too big argument, those 3 that he's mentioning. That's
huge.
A damn retirement fund.
Yeah.
I mean, what else do you need at that point?
Well, any one of them would be like big enough. But I'm saying, I think he probably goes on. They're going to always be new challenges, especially in that division. And but I only really care about the Ferguson one. You could take all the other ones away for now, and I'd be like, I just want to see Ferguson.
Yeah, that's the one that needs to happen next. I feel like that's just negotiation tactics, because I think Khabib, sure, he wants money, everybody does, but I think he also fights for legacy. I think he fights for more than that. I mean, you just see it when the commission's like, yo, we're gonna we're gonna hold your $2 million. He's like, keep it. I don't want it. I don't care. That could also be just talk as well, but I do think there's something to that. I think for a long time he's been saying he's the best lightweight. A lot of people have been saying he's the best lightweight before he even won the title. He just never got that chance, right? I feel like when somebody becomes great, it's not really the build-up. Nobody really looks at the weight of the title, but what you did once you had that title. And I feel like with all the contenders that are out there, all the big money fights that are out there for him, I don't feel like he's going to retire anytime soon. He's healthy, he's somewhat young.
I'm very anxious to see what his star is after this whole McGregor thing. I just want to see, like, if it's not McGregor's fight next, which hopefully it's not, but like if it's Ferguson, that fight has like gradually gotten bigger and bigger. But is it to the point now where that's like a million pay-per-view, you know what I mean? Like, has he got to that level? Because I wanted to see that with Diaz. I wanted to see what he had after the whole thing, but then he's had his whole disputes. We have never seen him since the whole McGregor situation. So I want to see what Nurmagomedov looks like in terms of the casual injury, like all the outside interests that really makes a good fighter into a great fighter in the
you want to see if he's a pay-per-view ace-fighter, essentially is what you're saying. I want to ask you a question, okay? Because this is an interesting legacy that Khabib is building, especially with the idea that I'm going to get out sooner than you think or want me to. Let's say he beats Tony Ferguson. Let's say he beats Conor in a rematch, and let's say he beats, add another name, could be more of a celebrity fight for him, but add one more name, whatever, walks away. What do we do with him at the upper room table of the greatest of all times? Now, this table, really nice sitting with you guys right here, but that table, membership has its privileges. How much does he crack that argument? Not in a, hey, let's fill time and make another segment on the show, but legitimately, could he be...
If you retire at 30 fights plus undefeated in the lightweight division and you were a champion, bro, you are at
and you dominated, where you didn't even lose rounds? Yeah. Like, I mean, it's just, to me, it would be a no-brainer. Yeah. But if he does that to Tony Ferguson alone, I'm like, I'm already sold anyway, but I'm like, if he does that to Tony Ferguson.
Okay, you're saying he could sit at the table. Could he be the GOAT, though? Is there enough left for him to in a 3-4 fight window to be the GOAT?
I don't know. I have to think about it. We'll see who he fights and what it looks like.
Yeah, you have to see what it looks like as well. Yeah,
But he would be in the conversation. He'd be in the conversation for sure.
but I'm just saying he has the opportunity to blow that. He has the opportunity to just destroy that by just racking up wins, just doing what he's been doing, and it also looks, I don't want to say effortless, but
He does make it look easy.
But it's not like he's taking. I feel like you can make a case that most of the damage he's taken has probably been in training camp rather than the actual fights.
100%.
So, dude, if it's that
From his
easy
dad,
for
too.
you,
His dad kicks his ass.
yeah, apparently. If it's that easy for you, just keep racking up wins, man.
Smashes.
Become the GOAT, you know?
Look, I think in the end, either his competitive drive forces him to continue or the fact that he recognizes the opportunities for money. But I do think there's a part of him that wants out, out fast. He's wrestling with that, you know. So, all right, very quickly, last segment. It's the favorite segment of this panel, Under the Radar. A story that went by, could be very, very small, just something kind of small and interesting that went through the websites on our reverse chronological order that maybe the people didn't pick up on. Who would like to go first?
Me right here.
All right, let's hear it.
A few days ago on TMZ, our man Chris Weidman, former middleweight champion, one of the nicest guys, by the way, to interview in the sport. No one's debating that. I don't know if he actually did beat Anderson Silva twice or Anderson Silva lost twice. That's another debate for another show. He told TMZ he wants Jon Jones next. Bro, I don't think you really want that smoke.
He did say that.
4 losses in his last 5, all 4 by pretty brutal knockout. You want to move up to 205, that's fine. Little desperate reinvention post-career. Call out Luke Rockhold and finally make that rematch. Hey, call out Luke Thomas after that. Don't go near Jon Jones. There's not enough pictograms left to put in your body. Don't do it. Thank you. That's my platform.
You know, this one's kind of it's kind of developing as we're speaking. It's not been in the news cycle for long, but John Lineker he was supposed to fight in this Brooklyn card, and now he's trying to get a fight as soon as possible. The thing that I like about it is, for a long time, he was so dedicated to 125 pounds, and they had to basically force him out. Now he's open to taking a fight either bantamweight or featherweight, which to me, I'm like, it speaks to a whole different set of possibilities for that guy. I really feel like he's won like 8 of his last 9 or 9 of his last 10. Amazing fight. Only Dillashaw, I think, was his loss. And I would love to see that guy competing at featherweight because he's that big. I feel like he could do some damage there too. So him bringing that up to me, it opened up a whole new realm of possibility.
He's so tiny. Well, I don't think he's that big.
He's not big,
pretty
but
big.
Man,
He's a power puncher.
He hits like a lightweight. He packs some punch. I would say, the Colombian queen, Sabina Mazo, former LFA champion. You guys might remember her. She had 2 viral head kick knockouts. From Medellin, that's right. She's making her UFC debut at UFC on ESPN 2, fighting Marina Moroz, a veteran. And, this is at flyweight. We talk about, this is a new division. You talk about strawweight being, an amazing division. I feel like flyweight can turn into something.
Shocked.
We got some interesting characters.
She's taking on Marina Moroz, who I think is a good matchup for Sabina. Yeah.
And Sabina's only 21,
I'm shocked, man.
Interesting prospects.
UFC announcers are going to Miami, and you make that your under the radar. Going back to Miami the first time. And,
great.
That's true. Miami too. Hopefully MMA fighting.
I thought for sure you were going there.
Yeah, and again, Paulo Costa versus Romero.
Well, that's the thing. That's not even official.
That fight is a bag of sex. That's fantastic.
Yeah, that is just so ridiculously good. Under the radar will be about Fabricio Verdum saving a little boy, well, not a little boy, but like a teenager, from drowning on the beach. They didn't get the footage of him actually saving him, but they got him kind of like walking him out of the water, and he's like, oh.
He threw a boomerang at him, and he caught it and came in.
Whatever the method was, Fabricio Verdum, the Ramzan Kadyrov stuff's a little weird, but he was out there on the beach saving a guy from drowning, and they got a little bit of footage of it. So shouts to Fabricio for doing a great act.
We have a new segment where we pitch conspiracy theories ideas in MMA?
No, that's on Eddie Bravo's show.
Oh, sorry. I'll have to go on there and bring up Dillashaw next time. Thank you.
What was the conspiracy theory?
Well, Dana's never liked him. He didn't get the title rematch after the controversial loss to Cruz. He had to wait 2 years, even though Cody Garbrandt, with no title defenses, got an immediate one. And I thought this fight on Saturday last week was all about 2 things. It was about, hey, if someone's going to get a chance at 2 belts, it's got to be TJ, because Henry didn't really deserve it. I don't even think he beat Johnson, by the way. And on TJ, I've been sent down to kill the light flyweight division. But that's not true. Dana set up Dillashaw to fail under this conspiracy theory, if you buy into it and believe it.
Then why would he stump for the referee making a bad call?
Just hear out my conspiracy theory for a second. He sent him down so he'd be weak to give Cejudo an easier chance of knocking him out for the win to become a star, knowingly that you'll get 2 fights out of it because you can do the rematch back at 135 and you can set up Cejudo because Dana hates unions.
Wow.
All right, well,
this is a lot of credit for Dana here.
I didn't say I believe that. I'm just saying you can.
I stopped
connect
listening about halfway in.
You connect the dots there. All right.
All right, let's do this. Time now for After the Beat. It's where we take your questions using the hashtag #TheMMA Beat. You don't have to change anything. You don't have to go anywhere. Wherever you're watching, take a sip of water and just wait like 3 seconds. After the Beat starts now.
That's why GSP kick it. Khabib. Thank you.
Time now for After the Beat. Welcome back, Luke Thomas, Denny Segura, Brian Campbell, Iceman Mindenhall. We have looked at your questions, your comments, your bitches, your gripes, and your smart-ass remarks. We have assembled the best. I'll be honest about today. I had to do some digging. The questions were not as good as they were in previous weeks. Y'all let me down a little bit. We got a couple of gems in there, but I had to get, I mean, you ever go,
man.
So, like, what kind of shopper are you? Are you the kind of shopper that's like, I like to just go to the place where I know I can find my stuff? Or are you like my wife who like loves to go to TJ Maxx because they don't mind digging through stuff for an hour to find that one shirt, that's on sale. I can't shop that way. What about you?
I'm goal-oriented. I go in there, I get exactly what I need
And
to
I'm
get
out. Yeah, I'm exactly the same. So I had to be a TJ Maxx shopper with these. I found some deals, but it was a lot of things I didn't need. All right, let's go to the first question. Danny, what are your favorite MMA belt designs? I really like the belts from Dream.
Gosh.
The Dream ones are pretty cool.
The Pride Grand-Prix belts were my favorite. The normal silver Pride belts I did not like.
Yeah.
But here's what I figured out. The belts where the center crest looks like a shield, where it is more angular like this, and they're nice and big, those are the ones I like. But the reason I don't like the new one is because literally if you take the normal sort of square to make the octagon, they just lowered the profile, and it feels like they kind of shrink it a little bit. I didn't like that.
I would say the Dream ones. Alistair Overeem has a lot of pictures with his Dream ones, and they look sick. But I always like the UFC one, not the new one, but the one prior to that. I think the new one's all right. I think it'll take me some time to grow on it. But I really like, this is not belts, but I really liked when Pride used to hand out the trophies. Mm-hmm. Those always look sick.
Yeah.
The UFC Super Fight Championship belt that Shamrock and Gracie fought for has always been my favorite. But do you know what the best looking MMA belt there ever has been? The one the UFC just got rid of. So it's like, what's going on here?
That was
it's fantastic.
belt,
Say
man.
something bad about it. You can't.
I dig, I like the old design of the UFC belt. I always thought that
I
was
think I know what you're going to say.
What? The Bellator one?
The money belt between Mayweather and Conor McGregor.
That was a pretty cool belt.
Boxing belts are just turds.
They look
the
cheap.
WWF belt back in the day was awesome. But if we're going to the MMA,
Spread the eagle one?
I do dig this kind of Stanley Cup concept. I don't know if they're doing this. Have they always done this? But Bellator is putting the names of the people who've held the belt or something on, or maybe it would be people in the, I don't know what it is, like the tournament. I don't understand, but on their belt on the side are the names of them.
Yep.
That's kind of cool.
Yeah, that's kind of interesting. I would say the Sengoku belt was terrible. The Elite XC belt had the eagle on it, kind of coming out to the sides. I thought that was kind of interesting. I'm trying to think about what else. The Dream ones were good.
Force one was always kind of.
I don't remember the World Series of Fighting ones.
Is it time to take a chance and reimagine what you win? I know some people in some sports have tried
feel like the
rings, jackets. We've tried different things. Is there something cooler than a belt that we've never thought of?
Chain,
Crown bracelet.
teeth, grills.
I feel like
Car?
the WC ones were
Tattoo?
kind of cool. I don't quite remember.
It's sort of like a buzzsaw in a circle a little bit. It's all silver, and it had a
Silver,
lot of
yeah.
different markings on it. That was okay. They're not all. I agree that the one the UFC was using was pretty good. I thought they just kind of should have updated that one. But again, that one was more, sort of like a large square centerpiece. I do think that the new belt that they have, the UFC, the sides are better.
Yeah.
I like the rubies being put in for title defenses.
How about the champion doesn't have to wear Reebok gear and he can wear any trunks he wants with dynamic fasteners ads on the back and you can kind of...
I'm not sure that's an improvement.
I think that the thing about the old design with the UFC belts, you'd see them up on on the podium when they're going to do their talks or whatever, and there was some kind of reverence behind just seeing them, like back in the day at least. When we were, George St. Pierre's it couldn't get it away from you. You had Anderson Silva. Those belts really meant something, so they kind of kept that feeling for me all the way through it. Even though there was all these interim belts and everything floating around, they still had some kind of like how there was some kind of difficulty associated to looking at them where you're like, wow, man, to have that meant something.
Yeah.
So I feel like that's why that belt is so classic looking.
And I feel like the old UFC belt, it looked kind of cool because it was kind of flat and just kind of like large, like spread out.
Yep.
This one with the main one is like, you know, you
narrow.
get the octagon and it's kind of small. It doesn't feel like as big. I took a picture of Henry Cejudo, put it up on my Instagram.
It did look nice and new.
Yeah.
Yeah, but it didn't look like, I don't know. Like, it's nice when you just see
Like a giant belt
yeah,
buckle?
like a giant belt, yeah.
Here's my thing about it. It's like the new belt looks like a robot designed it. Like, imagine if you took the old UFC belt, and you're like, okay, we want something like this. And then the robot algorithm kind of jacked it up and then came out with something that was sort of right, but not really. Sort of what it feels like. I don't know how to
Very
explain
new Coke.
Yeah, it's like it's Crystal Pepsi.
That's not a Jon Jones joke.
It tastes the same, but
He doesn't know what you're talking about again.
Crystal Pepsi.
No, him. He's
Crystal Pepsi?
You ever had it?
I saw a video of somebody drink once like a 10-year-old Crystal Pepsi and threw up.
You got they were reselling it not
on
too long
YouTube.
ago.
Yeah.
Throwing
That's
up
like
on
from
Zima.
when? The
I was
90s?
gonna say
Back when I-
Zima's
back when I was-
Zima's
Really?
back. Oh yeah, Zima's back.
I've never had a Zima.
wow.
That's a lie.
Chance.
That's a lie. You're kidding? It's like any alcoholic beverage I've probably had a dozen times. I probably had it in my tummy right now. All right, next. Okay, Brian, you talk about the overabundance and exhaustion caused by UFC's packed schedule. If you weren't paid to cover it, would you still be watching nearly all, or as I have now, just wait for clips and highlights after the fact? Be honest.
Please.
Be honest.
Honestly, no, I would not watch it all.
Yeah.
I'm a combat sports fan. I love MMA, boxing, and pro wrestling. It's very hard to fill all three in my week as well. But to the point of that question, no, the quality is not enough across the board where I have to see every single card top to bottom. There's some cards I don't even have to see the main event.
Yeah.
Right. I would watch 1/10 what I
Yeah, I was gonna say, your Saturday nights at some point you want again. Like you would love to have some Saturday nights where you're not watching fights all the time, and it sounds like a good problem for a lot of people who want to have that problem. But I would not be watching. I'd probably maybe half, if that. I'd watch me. I'd watch the events, the ones that matter. But a lot of the, the Bellators and fight nights, and I'm sure a lot of those would go by the wayside.
I'd definitely watch all the pay-per-views and probably most, if not all. Like, I guess back then the UFC on Fox, now UFC on ESPN. But the smaller fight nights, I wouldn't catch them live, just post, like the next day or something like that, like on Sunday. I would do that, and then because there's also, you got to keep in mind, there's also like the weird Fight Path shows that are like at weird hours because they're taking place like across the world. So those I would never catch live, but I would catch them post. Yeah.
Yeah, I would skip a ton, for sure. I mean, it's like people are like, "Oh my God, that means you're not a real fan." Great, not a real fan then. Don't care. Your tolerance for bad fighting doesn't make you a better fight fan. It makes you a more committed fight fan, I'll give you that. But it doesn't make you a better one. It's like, dude, I'll watch super bad MMA.
Okay.
All yours. All yours. Next. With the ESPN era beginning, Chuck, what presentational elements from other sports, look at the question here, from other sports, would you like to see the UFC experiment with? Now, think about some of the sports broadcasts you watch.
Yeah, that's what I was kind of going through.
Yeah.
That's a toughie. Nothing really jumps out. I know that, like, what was the Cletus or whatever? There was a robot from from Fox. They were like incorporating that, and I felt like that was all off. Like back in the day.
Can you put
like
the question up one more time? I'm sure I read it correctly. Presentational elements. I'm less concerned about like accoutrement like that.
Yeah.
And I don't know if it's even possible inside of an MMA cage, but the way they do it now is, if you have an octagon, one of the benefits of it is obviously you have all these many posts around it versus the Bellator circular cage where you have to just kind of post up. So the cameraman gets on there and then looks down. If you go and watch a football game, they have the cameras on a series of wires that hang and they can move it like a puppet. Yeah. I wonder if there's some kind of innovative technology where the camera can be controlled by some other operator, where the camera can go inside the octagon and then follow the people at almost waist or eye level and then pull out and then zoom out. It would probably cost a small fortune or a huge fortune at that. But I wonder how that would transform, because a lot of times you're filming at an angle and they cut off the feet, which is like the most important thing to be looking at for a dork like me anyway.
Are we missing out on not having an unofficial score on a broadcast
I
of boxing who can not only explain why you would score, why there's a debate? So I feel like in so many UFC fights, you come to the scores and it could be all over the place and they don't really focus.
It's a good one. They used to use Eddie Bravo. They stopped.
Yeah.
That's right.
Yeah, I would agree with Brian. I don't really have anything that stands out at the moment, but that'd be a big one. Boxing does a great job at that because if you're not a huge fan, like it's kind of hard. Sometimes already being a big fan and already knowing how fights should be scored is already difficult to judge how fights are being scored. If you're a casual, I mean, it must be a nightmare to figure out who won. So if you have somebody that knows, giving you details on who won round by round, that'd be nice for sure. Bellator does a good job at that when Jimmy Smith was over.
Yeah, he would score at the same time.
The unofficial scorecard.
Does Big John score?
I don't think he does.
It's interesting because Big John was a judge as well. He wasn't just a referee. That's interesting that they may have
I
taken
could be
that
wrong
away.
though, but
Here's the thing I don't understand, and I know Bellator's going to get on me and get mad at me. I'm not trying to I hope Bellator has a majorly successful weekend. I really do. I don't know that I understand having 10 people on a desk and it dragging out the broadcast. You ever notice that? They'll go to the desk and there'll be like 2 fighters and Jay Glazer, and it's like, I'm not saying the analysis is bad. It's pretty good, actually, and everyone does a good job. But it brings that show to a grinding halt. I'm not sure what benefit it really serves. Save that kind of thing for a pre-fight show or a post-fight show, or have it be a much quick hitter, or you know what I mean? Like save all the big analysis for before or after, because I do want to hear from Frank and I do want to hear from Josh Thompson. I don't know that I want to hear from them in between fights. I think that kind of kills the buzz for me a little bit.
Yep.
So does Wash Goldie, but that's another topic.
He's gonna start tweeting you.
I do that to pop you. Come on.
Yeah, bro, I've made my case about that. I have moved on. I'm trying to think, is there anything else that we like from the boxing broadcast that they do?
I mean, no one's ever done post-round interviews, luckily, with fighters. We can stay away from that. But boxing's not really known for innovation outside of attempts at ref cam, which doesn't work either.
Do we like ref cam?
No.
You don't like ref cam?
I don't know. It gives me seizures. What else does it give me?
I like ref cam.
gives you a different perspective on the fight.
No?
It's also good to when you want to question like a referee's call, because you're seeing their point of view, or more or less.
Yeah.
So you get a good insight, because we get the benefit of all the cameras.
Like the body cam footage?
Yeah.
All innovations work. Remember when ESPN got the NBA contract and they put that camera at below the rim in the floor, so you can look up, and it became the ball cam. And I'm not talking about the
Basketball?
yeah.
Or how about, of course you would go there. You guys remember when NHL on Fox had the puck that glowed?
Yes.
I was
and it
telling them.
glowed across the screen?
Yes.
People apparently hated that.
Yeah.
But you don't need a major innovation. Okay. You don't need, to really update your broadcast, you don't need some kind of earth-shattering new technology, but you have to reimagine a way to present it. And 3D is washed. No one cares about that. We're going to watch fights in 3D.
Dude,
Nobody
3D
cares.
gives me a headache.
Nobody cares. You wear glasses and it's stupid. People shoot in 8K, but TVs, no one has an 8K TV, and so who cares? But to me, I think if they really reimagined how we get cameras inside the octagon, how we were able to lower inside and maneuver, because remember, I've often talked about it on the Monday Morning Analyst, most of the action is outside the 2 black lines rotating around the fence line. So then something needs to be lowered and then could rotate. But you would have to have something that could really move fast.
A drone.
A drone? Dude, a drone cam would be sick.
Yeah.
That
What
kind
about a camera in the corner post that in
They
its
do those. I don't find those that illuminating. I don't find those that helpful.
Can it move up and down and adjust?
Ooh. No, I think most of them are pretty fixed. So even one that could go
One that can slide up and down, and
that'd be
the
interesting.
lens can change the angle.
That'd be interesting. Yeah, I don't know. Or I also think putting some kind of chip in the glove to get some kind of information. I don't know how helpful that would be, but I'd be curious to know what we could get from it. That'd be kind of interesting. By the way, you guys ever watch anything that comes out of CES, the Consumer Electronics Show? No.
Yeah.
Why would anybody ever say yes to any question I ask on this show? Okay. The Consumer Electronics Show is maybe the biggest trade show in the world, right? Everyone except Apple goes there. One of the major innovations this year, in addition to laptops and home technology, was fitness technology. A couple years ago, it was wearables. This one was workout stuff, and especially apparently in fight stuff. I'm told that was one of the bigger ones. So they had boxing gloves, MMA gloves, and heavy bags that could give you all kinds of data about your activity, the hardness of the punch, all kinds of stuff. And they had one where the bag moved and then came at you. You guys didn't see any of this?
I didn't see any of that.
Why would you?
I've been to CES before.
Have you?
Yeah.
I love CES.
Yeah, it's cool. It's very cool. I will say that the UFC has kind of started to do some of the stuff I wanted to see. Like, just having Trevor Whitman or somebody like that kind of explaining. I've always dug that sort of thing. I always wanted to hear microphones on corners. They've dabbled with that, and on Fight Pass, you can actually click something.
choose,
yeah,
yeah.
exactly. You can actually listen on the corner. That stuff I like. I love hearing how corners interact with their fighters, what's effective, what's not, how, you know what I mean? It's like hearing a coach, like coaching in football. Like, it would be like hearing them communicate with a quarterback or something like that. It's, to me, I love that, that interplay between the corners. So I love stuff like that. If they could enhance any of that, I guess I would.
I pop for announcer cam when you end up seeing the reaction from like Anik and Rogan of a knockout or something, and
That's cool.
That's always
Rogan's
fun,
face is just blank. That's always pretty.
Yeah, or Bruce Buffer. Because those guys get in his face too, like TJ's, it'd be kind of cool to get that kind of thing.
True.
All right, so there you go, UFC, you're welcome. All right, next. Boys, was there ever a point any of your journalistic careers where you had to decide between a big opportunity or sticking to your moral values, huh? Who here was
like
given money to go to Saudi Arabia and wrestle for the WWE?
Oh, man. I was.
Anybody? Anybody had to make a choice there? Usually the money is not big enough where you have to worry about this.
I mean, I'm sure all of you guys have been offered strange things that you're like, I can't really justify doing that. There's been multiple overseas type situations where people are like, hey, do you want to go do this for some coverage?
Yeah, promoters will fly you out.
Promoters will do
International
that all the
travel,
time. And I mean, I've never done anything like that, but
The answer is no.
yeah, I mean, it's just,
I've had to turn down
fairly
discounts for
glaring.
international travel to cover fights. Pacquiao in Macau, anybody, or straight up,
Did you go to that fight?
I did not. There's two of them. Or straight up, we'll fly you here, but you have to write this story that we love. Yeah, you turn that down.
Yeah.
You stand up.
Yeah, I've had that happen to me once. Like, oh, we'll fly you out. We got you in hotel. We got you in everything. We just need the coverage, and that gets into like weird territory. So
I want to do
gotta
that
say
one
no.
time for a promotion that I know is going to tank, because I'll take the money, then write a terrible story about him, and then just watch him go under.
that's always the risk I would run, as I would just piss them off in the end. So
That's where I end up with everybody. Everyone just ends up mad at me.
Yeah.
I think, those are always the big ones, is that there's a lot of promotions that are like, yeah, we'll fly you out. And it sounds so innocuous because they offer it so readily.
Yeah.
They're like, yeah, we'll just fly you out. I was like, really, word? So no, I've never done that. That's probably about it. Usually the money's not big enough. No one's offering,
right.
here's 50 grand to do X.
Really,
Like,
it's
there's
more
no
that they're
money.
just offering you a trip out to where they're at.
Yeah.
A lot of times the money is insignificant. It's just they want you at their event. So
Yeah. I do wonder, like, what celebrities might have been offered, though.
Well, as journalists, we do sell our soul for food. How many
Yes.
times has there been, hey, there's a media gathering to interview this fighter?
Right.
And how many times do we check the fine print and go, well, is there food involved? And how many times do you make that decision, yes, based on the restaurant? Right?
I had a buddy of mine. I have a buddy of mine. He doesn't cover boxing anymore. You might remember him. Do you remember Gautam Nagesh?
No.
You don't remember him? I guarantee you've met him because did you cover Peterson versus Khan?
I didn't cover it there, no.
No, I can't remember. I'm pretty sure you might.
But Khan got screwed. There was a man in the black hat. at ringside.
Anyway,
Yeah.
he had a rule where he never accepted anything more than $5 from any promoter. In other words, he might eat your meal that you offered, but probably not. Even if you offered, like, you ever seen those thumb drives where they put all the stuff on it? You'd give them all back. His rule was no more than $5 from any promoter, ever. It's a pretty hardcore rule. I'm like, dude, you could eat the mashed potatoes. I don't think you're cool if you want to do that. But he was hardcore about it, man.
Yeah.
So I've seen that, too. Anyway, all right, that's about it, right? I can't think of anything. All the TV opportunities I've ever had were pretty much above board. So
yeah.
Pretty much.
yeah, pretty much, except for the ones where we were covering underground fights between 11-year-olds. All right, next.
The money was good, man.
Yes, children fights. All right, true or false? Khabib's book sells over 5 million copies. I think this is the wrong one. Oh, no, these are supposed to be listed out. All right, so true or false, boys? Here we go. Khabib's book sells over 5 million copies. True or false?
True.
What do you think?
False.
False, I say.
False.
Although, overseas, you never know, man.
There's a lot of Russian people.
He is a hero in the Muslim sports world.
Yes.
Gronk kisses his daddy Brady on the mouth.
No.
I'm going to say true.
What?
True.
False.
True.
Scandal.
Luke, you have cooler tattoos than Greg Hardy. That ain't hard, man. I don't have cool tattoos, but the ones I have are better than his. I'm like shockingly bad
Punctuation
ones.
up in this thing, man.
You like his goatee? You're a facial hair guy.
Yeah, I don't like it.
Very like Sideshow Bob. Like
Yeah, it's a little weird. And his tattoo, also some of his tattoos are just unfinished. Like he has, I've always wondered about Robbie Lawler's back tattoo, like the giant. It's some sort of Asian calligraphy. It's unfinished. It's just the trace outline. He never colored it in. I was always like, you just got the trace? Like, really?
you gonna draw that?
Yeah, it's like, aren't you gonna fill that in? But hey, he marches to the beat of his own drum. And by the way, I like how they wrote sequentially. You, Luke, have cooler tattoos, comma, then Greg Hardy, like he comes next or something. Fedor's never cried.
That's can't be
True or false?
That has to be true.
Your interview with him, surprisingly, he's very cultured in Russian literature.
I
and
actually
film.
asked him that exact question on a feature I wrote, and he said he had cried before.
Did he say why?
I don't remember him saying why, but he said he had. I asked him that because I was like, "Do you ever cry?" And he's like, "I cry." You know?
Fedor is one of these guys.
I cried once.
I cried once.
Fedor is one of
It's
these
an
guys
infant.
where you have to really ask him weird questions.
Yeah.
Because if you come down the middle with
Yeah.
like the common
Oh yeah, he just.
softball, he just watches them all go past.
Yeah.
He doesn't swing on any of them. You have to really get out there on him a little bit. I don't know if you guys heard about this. A weed commercial during the Super Bowl would have tanked the stock market and brought forth the end of days. Did you guys hear about this on CBS?
I did.
So CBS is showing the. Did you hear about this, Danny?
I did not. Feel me?
Of course, why would you? I'm teasing. So CBS is airing. You can put the thing down. CBS is airing this year's Super Bowl, and a company known as Acreage, which does in this particular case, they were trying to get an ad put on television for medical marijuana. It's backed by former Speaker of the House and a Republican, John Boehner. And CBS balked at it, and people are like, well, that was the wrong message to send. Because remember, they're not talking about sort of commercial weed you could just go buy, but rather medicinal kind, right? Which is which by the way, is such a Trojan horse nonsense portion of the argument. The argument is, it's my body, F off. Like, that's the real argument, but okay, you gotta convince the olds that there's a reason to do it. Anyway, people were surprised by this. Not me. You guys watched 60 Minutes anytime recently? Like in the last 5 years?
That was at the CES show.
How is it I'm the only one that knows what's happening in the wild? Like, any question I can ask you guys other than, is it raining outside? No one does it.
You keep coupling me with his answer. I have watched 60
Okay,
Minutes.
so
in the last
Chuck
5
is
years.
forgiven. You two, it's like, have you seen any movies? No. Have you read any books? No. Have you ever heard about
We're
this
too busy
show?
covering
No.
MMA.
I'm a
man.
pro wrestling journalist. Do you know how many hours per week you have to do?
It's like, I am next to these uncultured goons. Have you not watched 60 Minutes any time in the last 5 years?
Of course I have.
Okay. Did you not notice how many, ads were targeted to the elderly, but more importantly, how many pharmaceutical ads they took?
Yeah, there's
So it just...
Diabetes, all that.
all that stuff. So again, CBS is drenched in money from pharmaceutical companies, but they're not. They scuttled the ad. It just is kind of hilarious that they're going to have beer commercials.
I know.
Through the wazoo on this one. So just remember that your Super Bowl commercials are brought to you by the pharmaceutical industry and big alcohol, who don't want you anywhere near medical marijuana. I've always thought that was kind of funny. And apparently I'm the only one who reads the news. I didn't realize this.
Danny doesn't have TV.
yeah.
He has the internet.
That's true.
It's good enough. All right. There's more? I believe there's more. Is it morally justified that Dana White would have, I don't know why morally is the word here, would have rather TJ Dillashaw go fully unconscious rather than being saved via early stoppage? The more aware I become of CTE, the harder it becomes to support guys going out on their shield. Am I getting soft? Brian Campbell, you have not been here to discuss the full depths of the main event from UFC Brooklyn. Did you like
I know
the
you
stoppage?
called me crazy for posting that funny conspiracy theory, but this kind of plays into that, doesn't it?
No, it doesn't. Can you answer the question in a forthright way?
What was the question again? On my,
What do you make of the stoppage?
I thought the stoppage overall was quick. Yes, I don't think it was quick enough for me to send out tweets and look. He was getting battered. The one where his head snapped back on that sort of half uppercut. That's enough for a referee to be put in position to make a decision. I think when you add in that he's never fought at this weight class, that he was a vicious cut, and now we find afterwards with that ESPN photo essay thing and seeing what that was like. I think that factors in too. I was fine in the end with the stoppage. I will call it slightly early, but there's no...
It's so split second. You see something when these things are happening, and a lot of times when somebody gets rocked in a fight, you'll see the referee leap as if they're going to stop it, but they'll hesitate one last second just to see, because they're having that conflict with themselves, like to stop it or to let it go. And you see either guys go out, take the extra damage, or recover. It's like there's never going to be a perfect situation. It's perfectly possible that Dillashaw might have recovered. He was saying that he was already going for the single leg. He was doing all this. What I saw rings as a cage side is a guy. What you're just saying. He was rocked. He was going backwards. It looked like he was going out. And so it's hard to fault him. You can't fault him. But I understand though, in a fight like that, for a guy who killed himself, and all that, to get down to that weight, and for a super fight or whatever you want to call it, you understand it. What you want it to be more definitive. I think it's a really hard thing to figure out. But it doesn't help when Dillashaw is going up there saying that it was stolen from him and all that stuff. But I just don't envy the referees in those positions. I just don't think you can win.
I'd like to I'm not one of these guys who has any hesitancy about blasting referees, but I just don't think this is that case. Did I think it was a great stoppage? No, I didn't think it was a great one. It wasn't super clean. But number one, it's just weird that people want to get on me for being like, yeah, maybe we should find a way to live with drugs that are never going to go away. And those same people are like, yo, you should beat up guys until they're perfectly unconscious and their brains have been rattled. It's like, I'm the savage one? Okay. I'm sure that's true. Not at all. So that's one part about it is that. The other part is you look at Kevin McDonald, the guy's been reffing for almost 15 years.
Yeah.
Now, in these main event slots, a little bit less so. Okay. But Google any referee, Herb Dean, John McCarthy, Leon Roberts, Mark Goddard, all these guys, and you'll find they've made some bad stoppages because it's impossible not to make a bad stoppage. Google Kevin McDonald. You can't find one, man. You cannot find one. It's the first time he's ever come under scrutiny for one, and it's not because he's not been reffing at the UFC level. He has been. Not the main event level, okay. But then you're like, dude, shouldn't some of these guys, who, by the way, if you're doing well on all the prelim and then main card fights, shouldn't you get a main event slot once in a while? And, okay, it was a little early. It was a little early. I'm not going to sit here and go hardcore, but it's like guys wrestle on instinct, and he doesn't know the difference between wrestling instinct and not. And all things you brought up, it's like,
well, we've seen guys who are rocked go for single leg they think they're going for a single leg, but it's on the referee.
I think Dana's anger is more, not in a hatred of TJ conspiracy theory, but more in, this is our ESPN Plus debut main event. I don't want this to end in a Kane JDS 1.
Yeah, well, and it kind of did, right? Actually, half the time, 32 versus 104 seconds, which is kind of interesting. But,
that's a good point. I never considered that.
Yeah. But the point, but they did so much other than again. I thought the controversy in it was probably pretty good for it. So probably, everybody wants cleanliness in terms of the finish. Like, the head gets cut off by the guillotine. It's just not the world we live in. Sometimes you got to saw right through. Sometimes you just got to call it a day, man. So, anything else?
No, I think everyone that's spoken about this pretty much is saying the same thing. It wasn't the best stoppage out there, but by no means it was a bad stoppage. We saw what we saw. TJ Dillashaw was clearly hurt. Henry Cejudo was attacking him.
Perfectly.
The fight went on for several seconds.
Explainable, right? From his position, from the referee, you're like, well, he looked like he was rocked. I stopped the fight. I mean, you don't even have to go beyond. His is very basic to say what happened. It doesn't matter. The Herb Dean one where he let the guy take a beating for the last 30 seconds and what was it, 6 months ago in the European fight?
Yeah, it was CB Dollaway.
Yes. And I mean, that's the one. Those are the ones you're like, dude, we know Herb Dean.
Jesus,
we know Herb Dean. What the hell is going on? There are certain times where a referee, you're like, I want to know what the hell they were thinking. But this is not one of those situations.
This is the worst referee stoppage that Kevin McDonald has, then he's the best referee in the business.
Yeah.
I just thought it was very unfair.
By the way, in line with innovating broadcasts for both boxing and MMA, is it time to be able to interview judges after the fact?
Or referees on a stoppage. I want to hear why you made that
Sometimes we get
call.
referees in boxing. We never get referee interviews in MMA.
Yeah.
If you were we see this in boxing with one after another egregious scorecards, a lot of times by the same people. What if you just interviewed them on the broadcast? That was part of it. Having to stand up and put your face out there, I feel like that would put enough pressure on you to have to stay in line.
Yeah, and again, I'm not a member of the MMA JA, and I don't know if they're working on this, but one thing that might help me consider joining is if they were able to negotiate a way where one member of the media gets to speak to a commission rep about these judges' scorecards. At a bare minimum, someone has to answer for this. And I don't know who that is. Maybe the judges don't want to do it, but one of you donks on the commission needs to do it.
We don't want to clown them, but you do want an explanation. Okay, if this is the way you scored it, then why?
I'm talking about a good faith questioning, not a bad faith attack. And that needs to be, that is sorely missing in the sport. All right, last one. This ought to be dumb. Hey, Luke, with the majority of elite athletes in numerous sports, MMA, boxing, athletics is barely a sport. Cycling, football, tennis, etc., taking PEDs. Can you explain to the uninitiated why this is a case and why it's not? Wait. Did I misread this question when I put it in here? Can you explain to the uninitiated why this is the case and why it's not common knowledge. So here's what happened. All right, how do I want to present this? I ran into a buddy of mine and two of his friends who are they're my friends as well, but I'm not as attached to them. Both of them are doctors. Now they're surgeons. One is a neurosurgeon, one is a heart surgeon. Yeah, I know, two idiots, right? And they're married. It's like, you guys must be really poor. Anyway, they live here in New York, and they're wonderful people, but we got into a debate, and they were saying that, like, we were talking about elite athletes, whose name I won't mention because people will lose their mind, but you know who they are. There's elite athletes that just somehow never get injured or have these careers late into their life and are producing great numbers. It is my belief that uniformly all of them are on something, whether it is designer steroids or something else. And they just couldn't comprehend this. They were like, no, it wouldn't ever be this way. And I was like, y'all went to medical school, right? And they were trying to make arguments that were just like incredibly naive. But do you run into this? Do you run into people who believe that steroid use in sports is the exception and not the rule?
Yes.
Right.
Constantly. Yes.
Right. So when someone pops, they'll like it's so you're the bad apple in the bunch, right? Why is that perception so common? When usage is probably near ubiquitous.
When we are seeing combat athletes succeed in their late 30s, pushing 40 at levels that were never physically possible.
Forget combat athletes. How about any athlete? If you play in the NBA and you can play well into your 30s, traveling at 6 foot, I don't know, whatever, 9, whatever you are.
Starting to zero in on the guy you were talking about.
No. There'd be a lot of them in that case.
No, I know.
Or pick your sport, whatever you want, hockey, whatever. Like, these guys are playing, again, nutrition's getting better, okay. Exercise science is getting better, that's true. But the games are getting, if anything, more physical and more violent. So how is it possible that you can have these long streaks of productivity at record levels when your body is supposed to be breaking down? It is because you are getting help. And it's not, I'm not even mad at them for it. It's professional sports. Do what you're supposed to do. What I find incredible is this idea that people are like, no, if there's like 2% of people using. No, there's at a minimum 20%, if not much, much higher. It's probably close to around 40 or 50, based on some of our estimates, and probably even more than that.
What is your perfect world? Because this question isn't about people that don't believe. It's really about you. What is actually your perfect world?
There is no perfect world.
That everybody uses but has to disclose and take.
No, that's not what I believe. I believe that basically American sports gets it right. So what are the two different models? One is the Olympic model, which is this police state, and I think which is intimately tied to the war on drugs, right? Which carries all number of harms. It's A, ineffective. B, the zealotry that comes with anti-doping carries reputational harm for those who get caught up in it. We've seen that. And so it's incredibly wasteful in terms of resources. It simply doesn't work, and there are invasions of privacy. You can go on and on about all the harms associated. So it's clearly not working, and it's clearly not going to work. It's incapable of working. So then you have to come to a better conclusion, which is that we cannot eliminate these drugs. We have to find a way to live with it. I think that the American professional sports, which don't do what the Olympic side does, is the best way. Ownership and athletes get together and mutually craft a policy that everybody can live with. And you just go about your day after that. That, to me, is really the best, because now you've got athlete representation with their interest. You've got ownership stakeholders having their interest. The fans, I think the reason why the fans think it's such a rare thing is because they craft policies that enable designer use to be hidden on purpose. And therefore, the fans think it's some kind of rare thing, but they don't really care. They just want to see a great entertainment product. I believe fundamentally, when you're talking about sports as a career and these narrow windows, and you're importing Olympic testing, like, why do you have a 2 and a 4 year ban? It's to keep you out of rotational world and Olympic systems. You're importing that over to professional sports. It doesn't fit. It is incredibly damaging. It's not good for sport. It's not good for commerce. It's not good for the athletes. Let's find a way to craft a mutual policy and be done with it. And that is the end of it. That is what I believe. And the fact that it works so well in the NFL and the NBA and the NHL and, to a degree, in MLB is proof that that's a much better system.
Passionate words of a passionate man, John.
Right. Yep. It is crazy to me. We have prize fighting where we're like, these guys have narrow windows, and we're banning guys 2 to 4 years. Like, why would you import an Olympic system into a prize fighting commercial professional sport? It's utterly nonsensical.
But prize fighting, the danger of being knocked out by a guy who's on PEDs is worse than in other sports.
Do you believe that USADA has made a difference in deterring?
No, it's a clown show.
Okay.
It's a full-on clown
So
show.
it's the same as it was during, like, let's say, the Matt Hughes, Carlos Newton era? Probably a little bit less, right?
I
would
think
say
it's-
less. No, for sure.
Less.
Yeah.
Come on.
When you look at the product, does it look any safer to you? Is there any proof that you can show me that there are fewer brain concussions, that there are fewer injuries, that this is a safer sport than it used to be? If anything, it is more dangerous than ever. So to me, when I'm balancing risk, you want to balance a number of elements, including commission oversight, other medical screenings, health testing, and other kinds of things. But you cannot get rid of drugs. You are going to have to find a way to live with it. If you're talking about balancing risk, it turns out that going zealot on anti-doping, to me, there is no evidence that it's safer.
But even
Well,
under-
you can, for example, it's hard to make the case as a whole because who knows if actually USADA is catching everyone? We don't know still the percentage of people that are on it competing. But for example, you can just take a specific case like the Vitor Belfort case. Like you don't see him spinning will kick somebody into space like he did to Luke Rockhold, right? Like we clearly saw like a change in physique and performance, right? In both.
What's your question?
Well, you're saying is it safer? Well,
It wasn't safer in 2013, I'll tell you that much.
So we're to take...
would you say Vitor Belfort is a more dangerous fighter, I don't know, 5, 6, 7 years ago than he is now?
I would say that about any fighter.
Okay, what? Right, just because you're taking into consideration.
Are you asking
right?
if certain
But, like,
people respond more favorably to drug use than others? Yes.
Well, it's clear that it'll make you a more dangerous fighter for the most, or not for the most part,
that's
but
not,
maybe
that's
in some
not
cases.
clear at all.
I guess there needs to be more studies on it, but
Right.
like you can take certain cases, for example, like the one I just mentioned, and make a case that like sure, like this is a more dangerous fighter on PEDs or a certain substance than without it.
Well, I think that's why they banned TRT, though. But anyway, your plan is then essentially to just everyone agrees to what you can use.
No,
Usually, but people
you
are
could
still
agree to
gonna-
a penalization system that's somewhat relaxed. You could agree to
But the
certain
rich-
kinds of sanctions.
Here's the question: How did you feel about it with the PD situation without USADA in it? Like, are you okay with, for example, say like an organization like Bellator where they just do commission testing?
Yes, I think that's a far superior model. Yes.
Is that ideal?
Ideal, I don't know if it's ideal because even then,
What
the
would you add
athletes,
to that?
The athletes having a say.
Okay.
And by the way, the athletes might come up with a policy that's pretty strict, but not as strict as USADA. And on some level, I would just live with it. It's like if they had some level we have done this thing where it's like, well, there's the Reebok deal, and that's the UFC really hammering things. USADA was introduced as a way for the UFC to benefit themselves, for them to mitigate risk in the event of bad PR. It is the brother of the Reebok deal. And everyone has convinced themselves that it's some kind of way to like rid the sport of drugs. And it's not. And it never can be, and it never will be. It is a mechanism of corporate control. And once you begin to understand that, and then you begin to understand the mission failure, you begin to be like, well, then why are we doing this? We're doing it because it benefits UFC in the event of some kind of calamity.
I don't think that your system fixes it, though. I think it just
It
creates-
absolutely does. For a system that the athletes create, if there's disaster there, who's to blame? The Fighters Association, ownership, commission responsibility? It would spread blame. It wouldn't concentrate it. Right now, the UFC would bear the brunt of it because they're the ones in control. You spread that blame a little bit, and then there could be some reconciliation about it.
I don't care who you blame. It's the same problem, though. People are using, but okay, then you can agree that we can use this, but we can't use this.
No, I'm talking about in the events of calamity, right? In the events of calamity, let's say, God forbid, a death or serious injury happens inside the octagon. I hope it never happens, but let's say that it does. If it does now, the UFC can say, well, they're one of the ones in control, so therefore this USADA deal is sort of insulated. I mean, like, we did everything we could, right? But I know we got to wrap it up. But the idea here is if you spread the blame between a union, if such one existed, and ownership and commissions, then you could say, well, how do we redefine the system? What other kinds of changes could we make? But it wouldn't be on UFC to go super gung-ho to protect themselves. And by the way,
Okay, it would remove the clown from the circus to a certain degree, but it would still be a circus. More news at 11.
yes,
Quote the
we have
words
to go.
evermore.
It's an interesting conversation we should have for some time. People bring up the Vitor one, but in the end, when you really begin to look at the aggregate product and you ask yourself, is it safer? There's no evidence it's safer at all. Zero. So what is
There's
that?
also because there isn't any testing being done on the subject, right?
On who?
On these things like how a fighter's performance is with or without, and then tallying that up over a long period of time and then seeing, okay,
No, it's a
are we
different-
getting more knockouts?
It's a different question. How many knockouts were there relative to the amount of fighting time, relative to the amount of fighters? Different ways to measure to what extent was their injury before. What is their injury now? The number has gone up, if anything. All right, we got to go. We got to go. Long discussion. I appreciate the back and
ask
forth,
that last
boys.
question.
You're all
Wins.
wrong. You're all wrong, but it's okay. No, I'm teasing. It's a great discussion to have, and we'll have it at some point in the future. We have to go. Appreciate you guys doing this. This is the last one for January. We'll be back again in February. So join us then.
Have fun at the Super Bowl.
Yeah, enjoy the Super Bowl. I'm not going to be there. Enjoy the Super Bowl. Enjoy whatever you're going to do. Don't drink and drive. We'll see you guys in February. And until then, hands up, chin down, let them fly. That's Chuck. That's Brian. That's Danny. I'm Luke. Stay MMA Beat.